And this picture was taken the evening of the first day on Sunday night. So thanks, South Dakota Wildland Fire, for that image. Here today, I'll be presenting kind of a general overview of the current conditions, kind of what we've seen recently, but also looking ahead to November and the winter season. But certainly this isn't done in a vacuum by myself. I rely on a lot of partners across the region to provide information and some impacts and kind of on the ground information what's going on. So that includes several state climatologists, USDA partners, University of Nebraska, regional climate centers, and drought mitigation center, and so on. The next webinar, so you have a heads up on that, is November 17th at the same time, and I believe Nolan Deskin will be presenting.
Jim Angel.
Or Jim Angel, I'm sorry.
Illinois.
That's my mistake.
That's all right.
Jim Angel, the state climatologist of Illinois, will be doing that. Sorry, not Nolan. And of course, they're archived as well. So if you have colleagues, friends, family who want to check these out later, they sure can do that at the links there below. So like I said, we'll present a little bit on the last season and outlook again, and also touching on La Nina and that forecast for the winter season as well. Here's just another image, excuse me, of the burned area from the Cottonwood fire in South Dakota, and that's from MODIS satellite just this morning. So that's the final burn area there, and you see the edge on I-90 on the southwest corner, the southwest flank of that burn area there. All right, so moving ahead here, here's kind of a quick review of September. Just looking at temperature here, this is average temperature for the last full month anyway, and we see record warmest average temperature there in Ohio, but much of the region was above average or much above average. You see the numbers there that tells you how they rank in 122 year of record. So a handful there in the top 5, top 10 warmest Septembers on record, especially in the eastern part of our region up here. To kind of break that down into maximum and minimum temperatures, this is the maximum temperature and how that ranked for the month of September. And there again, much of the eastern region above average, and also the southern part, including Kansas, Missouri, and Colorado, above average for the last full month, with the western states being a little bit closer to near average, ranking kind of the middle of historical years as far as temperature, maximum temperature goes. And minimum temperature is really quite the interesting part of the story here, where that average temperature for September, and we'll see this again for the last, as I recap the last few months even, the minimum temperatures have really been driving those averages up. And you'll see Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana all 120 of 122 years, so that's second, third warmest. Similar Wisconsin, Michigan, 121 out of 122 years, so second warmest on record for September. So really those minimum temperatures have really been the story here in September. And then looking on the rainfall side, the precipitation side, for again the last full month, wetter than average. No big surprise, I'm sure, for most of us, especially in the northern and western states of the region, but certainly there are pockets of drier areas, particularly Kentucky, and some of those other areas. You know, Kansas is really kind of a mixed bag, and I'll show some detail there, where some areas are starting to dry out a little bit in the last few to several weeks, I guess 3 to 6 weeks or so. So these statewide rankings might not tell the whole story, but certainly in September it was a little bit wetter, especially across the northern states. And here, since that was just capturing September, here's where we're looking looking at since October 1st, so really just the month to date so far. And really those wet spots, I mentioned Kansas is kind of a funny story where the eastern part of the state has been quite wet, southeast has been quite wet, but the western side has been more on the dry side. Another area that's been exceptionally wet is up in Montana, and especially central Montana and the Milk River Basin that had some rainfall totals of over 5 inches that brought some flooding up to that area, and I'll have a little bit more on that later. But overall, the greens there are green shadings are a little bit above average, yellows are near to below average. So again, kind of a mixed bag there across the region. And then kind of looking back a little bit further, looking at July, August, and September, those 3 months kind of all tied together. And how do they rank as far as temperature and precipitation go? Here's temperature. And again, you see the eastern part of our region, the Great Lakes especially, warmer than average. This is maximum temperature for July through September. We're the central western side of our region, closer to near average for maximum temperatures over the last few months. But the next slide will show minimum temperatures, and that again is the telling part of the story here, where much of the eastern part of the region is record warmest for July through September. Those, again, 122 number ranks warmest out of 122 years of record, but a lot of close ones there with Minnesota, Illinois, Missouri all coming in 120, 121. So certainly minimum temperatures have been impacting our region. And we've seen, along with that, a lot of higher dew points as well, which is interesting, especially in recent weeks, a couple of recent weeks. I don't have a lot of data or information on that, but I know there's been some very high dew points, such as Des Moines reaching 67. I think that was last week. And then looking at July through September precipitation, so again, the last 3 full months, and how did that rank in the historical perspective? And again, we see a lot of really wet areas in our region in particular compared to the rest of the U.S. And we've seen that in a lot of agricultural impacts, especially with really wet fields and some local and regional flooding in some areas that have had some impacts across the region. So again, 120 out of 122 years in Minnesota, Iowa, and so on, and also Michigan, really display how wet it has been here in the last few months. Another perspective on this wetness issue or wetness concerns also is soil moisture. This is from the NLDAS products and from NOAA. And the purple areas are showing wetter than average soils. The warmer colors, yellow, oranges, reds, showing drier than average. So you see some areas of very wet soils, such as Montana, parts of Minnesota, Iowa, and eastern Kansas. But other than that, there are some dry areas too, particularly far eastern Ohio and parts of northern Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Nebraska. So again, we have some very wet areas and some areas that are still lingering dry or have emerged dry here in the last 4 to 6 weeks or so. Another picture to look at as far as recent climate goes is the U.S. Drought Monitor, and this is the map released this morning. And again, not a lot of drought in our region, but you see that area in South Dakota, Wyoming, still hanging on in there with some drought areas, and a very small area in Nebraska. And then kind of an emerging area there in western Kansas. I'll take a look at the next slide, which kind of shows the change in the region over the last 4 weeks. So this is the Weather Service Central Region states over the last month, and this is the net change. So they may have had ups and downs within that 4-week period, but this is kind of the difference between September 20th and then this week's map. So again, the green area shows quite a bit of improvement there in Montana and northwestern Wyoming, holding steady there in that gray area with no change. And then the yellow areas down south in both the southwest and southeast parts of our region have had some degradations, up to 2-class degradations on the drought monitor. So some areas of improvement and some areas of degradation according to the drought monitor over the last month. Another piece to the water story would be stream flow, and again, this just reemphasizes how wet it is down and continues to be, especially in southern Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and some parts of eastern Kansas, where stream flows are still running pretty high there with those blue colors much above normal there in the blue colors. A lot of greens, which are near average for this time of year, and that's also pretty good news here for the fall season for most folks. I would also add there that Ohio, Kentucky starting to get more on the dry side. In the case of Kentucky, they were closer to average about a month ago and have gradually reduced in their stream flow numbers. In the Milk River, as I mentioned, in Montana, this is a picture from the Great Falls Tribune up there in Montana, where they had some extreme rainfall. The hydrograph, this is showing just the recent week or so of the stream gauge there at the Milk River near Tampico, up in central Montana. They've really obviously dropped down from flood stage, but at this case was over 25 feet, and I believe it was forecast to crest near about 30 feet at Glasgow. That was the forecast a couple days before the peak occurred. So it's quite significant for this time of year, where they don't typically see rainfall totals or flooding in that part of the watershed or that part of our region. Looking further east now over the Great Lakes, there's a couple graphs here on water temperature of the Great Lakes. First on the left, they didn't get labeled here. I believe on the left is Lake Superior, on the right is Lake Michigan. So it gives you a couple examples there. The blue is the long-term average from 92 to 2015, and the red line is the trace for this current year. So you can see how in both those lakes, and this is true for all the lakes, all 5 of the Great Lakes, that they're running above average in water temperature for this year. And you can see they've been consistently above average pretty much since the beginning of the year, since January. So here, one of the concerns potentially for this season would be some amount of lake effect snow. If some strong cold air moves across the region, could interact with that warm water and cause some substantial snowfalls. So something just to be on the lookout for in the future. Another thing that I believe Dennis Toddy touched on last month, that now we're starting to see actually some frost temperatures below that 28-degree threshold, what we call a killing frost in some areas. And in general, the fall frost or freeze dates have been at the median date or later by a week or so, or even more in some regions. So on the left there is actually the date of the first 28-degree freeze, data through yesterday. So what's happened already so far this season. A lot of those green dots indicate that it's been sometime in October where they had a frost. The black smaller dots mean they have not yet reached 28 degrees yet. And then on the right is the median date, so you can kind of see how they compare. And you, as they get later dates towards the eastern part of the region. So again, we haven't seen that killing frost yet in a lot of the eastern and southern part of our states, but certainly, hopefully, we'll get there soon to impact, hopefully kill some of those bugs, improve pollen counts, and so on, that we may be already experiencing in our region. Just taking a couple snapshots in agriculture. I know last month, I believe Brad Rippey gave an overview of the growing season so far, and just an update since corn and soybeans have quite a big agricultural impact in our region. Here's corn condition, crop progress and condition. Just over 40% harvested so far this year, region-wide in the whole Corn Belt. Crop condition is really very good. As you can see at the top panel, the red line is 2016, tracking right along there at 2014 as a pretty good year. In general, corn is doing pretty well. Again, with some areas that have been slow to harvest, really due to some of the excess moisture issues that they've seen, especially in Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska. Soybeans in the top panel there, very similar crop condition to 2014. I know we've, for those of us in the agriculture sector, have heard consistently high yield forecasts from USDA for this crop season, and looks like they're hanging in there. Better than 60% of the crop has been harvested already by this time, so they're running right near average. Right near the 5-year average for harvest activities. Again, there are those small pockets that are slow to harvest and maybe don't have as good yields, but overall doing pretty well in the soybean sector as well. So I mentioned here are some other impacts. I did mention already harvest soybeans and corn, and it hasn't really just been precipitation and soil moisture that's affected harvest, but really a lot of humidity. Very high humidity, as I mentioned, some high dew points, fog, mist, which is really somewhat unusual for October for this time of year. Along with the wet soils, though, of course, come some compaction soil issues just from driving heavy equipment over, so that may be an issue that they'll have to deal with later. On the livestock side, cattle and sheep, especially in the western region, doing pretty well. And in the north, sugar beet and potato harvest and yields have been impacted by those wet conditions, again, late in the season. Some disease problems and slow crop progress and field work activities. So they're still looking at that. Sunflower harvest, a little slow, at least in western South Dakota, that's what I've heard. Winter wheat planting across the region, generally complete and emerged. So USDA didn't have the new statistics for this growing season yet that I could find, but generally looks pretty good from what I've heard across the region. And just a side note there, mosquitoes. I know a lot of us deal with mosquitoes and are concerned about West Nile. Now that we've had a hard frost over at least part of my region over here, obviously the populations have gone down quite a bit. In my state, 2016 was a relatively high West Nile virus year, and they're estimating about 115 to 120 cases after they've all been reported. That is really good news that the frost has occurred since our populations of that mosquito that carries West Nile was actually increasing very late in the year due to late moisture in August and so on. So finally they can put an end to most of those concerns of any new transmissions or new cases. All right, so that was kind of a recap of current or recent conditions that we've seen. So looking at the climate outlooks here, starting with kind of the near term, next 7 days, and I'll then expand out to 2 weeks and month and season ahead. So kind of making a progression in time ahead of us here. This first map is the 7-day total precipitation forecast from NOAA with forecasted moisture again in the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa region, and really further eastern Great Lakes region as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the next 7 days, generally drier in the west and southwest part of our region. These two maps are showing the outlook for the 8 to 14 day period, so that's October 27th to November 2nd, with temperature on the left, precipitation on the right. And the colors are showing that we're forecast to lean warmer than average in that period of the 27th through the 2nd. And the green shading on the right, increased probability of being wetter than average pretty much across the region there in that 8 to 14 day period. So warmer and wetter seems a little more likely over that time. And I know the last few days I've been watching the outlooks here, and they seem pretty consistent. They've kind of been holding steady with this pattern. So looks like that could be the case. Looking even further ahead, before I get into November and the winter season, for those of you who haven't heard, on October 13th, there was an update to the La Nina forecast, or the El Nino La Nina forecast for the fall season and winter ahead. And again, we're now in a La Nina watch status, which means La Nina conditions about 70% likely now for the fall season, according to the Climate Prediction Center, about 55 to 60% likely to carry through the winter season, which is December, January, February time period. And that's indicated by the blue bars on this graph, and that La Nina is more likely than the El Nino or neutral scenarios at this time, and through that DJF, which is December, January, February. So with that in mind, the Climate Prediction Center outlooks released this morning reflect very similar to La Nina pattern, especially in the winter season. And we'll look at that in just a second. Here's November. Oh, sorry, I have October on the headline. Should have been November. Temperature and precipitation probability. There on the left is temperature, and with the orange warm colors leaning warmer than average across most of the United States, with the exception of the Pacific Northwest through November. And again, that's consistent at least with that 8 to 14 day outlook, where it's leaning warmer at least to start the month of November. On the right there is precipitation, and looking to see a more active pattern settle in across the northwest part of the continental U.S., and that green shading indicating above median precipitation, more likely there in November, and the southern part of our region, of the central region, leaning towards the drier side for the month of November. And here, this is now looking at the 3-month period of November, December, and January, kind of putting those 3 months together as a season, and still slightly leaning warmer than average probability over much of the central region states. And on the left, and on the right, continuing on that trend of above median precipitation, more likely in the northern Rockies, drier in the southwest. And this is for November through January. Looking at December, January, February, things tend to change a little bit here, as the La Nina pattern is pretty strong here in these outlook maps. Given that we have a weak event, this is very much still consistent with generally La Nina pattern in our area. So below average temperatures there on the right, more favored over the northern states there, and on the right, above average precipitation, more likely there over the northern Rockies and the Great Lakes region. So all that being said about La Nina, there are a lot of other players in our wintertime climate, including influences from Arctic and northern oceans of both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, and kind of those patterns that settle in over 2 or 3 weeks at a time that we can see over the winter season that can really change kind of our climate pattern during that time of year. So there's a lot more to the story than just La Nina, but that is one piece of the puzzle, so to speak, in forecasting our wintertime climate. Here and then here's a drought outlook, which is a little bit tied there to the Climate Prediction Center outlook for the season ahead. This is through the end of January, and those green colors indicate drought removal likely, particularly in the western part of our region. They don't, at this time, identify any further drought development likely over our region. That is often a little more challenging to forecast from that perspective. So, but also in the winter season is generally the drier time of year for some of us. So we don't often see a large growth in drought area over the winter season. So here, a couple summary slides. This is on, again, current recent conditions. Warmer than average temperatures have really been driven by the minimum temperatures over the last few months. So far this season, we've seen frost or freeze temperatures occurring kind of at the median date or later across the region. So someone mentioned to me the other day, we're kind of running on borrowed time to take care of those gardens and outdoor work. But it's pleasant and we'll enjoy it while it lasts. Rainfall much above average for at least 4 of the states in the Midwest and Northern Plains in September, and July through September ranked top 5 wettest in 6 of our states in our region. Although some of them have turned dry recently, they have been wet in the last few months. And then looking ahead, again, La Nina watch is in effect. Generally a weak event is expected. So the forecast may be a little bit less reliable as far as impacts up in our area. Warmer than average temperatures projected through November, according to the Climate Prediction Center outlooks, more likely to turn cooler than average in December, January, and some increased potential there for wetter than average conditions in the Northern Rockies and Great Lakes region over the winter season. With that, here's some more information on some of the partners that help piece these presentations together. And you can also view the past presentations and this presentation at that link, at the 2 links at the top. And if you have any other questions, we're happy to answer those here at this time, but you can also contact any of the folks here on this slide, and they'll be happy to help you as well. So with that, Doug, I'll turn it over for questions if you'd like.
Thank you, Laura. That was fantastic, and got through that in about 30 minutes, which is great. So I'm looking at a couple questions that were asked on the question panel. If anybody else has any questions, I can scan those. So if you want to raise your hand or even write them into the question panel, that is fine. I see Benjamin Diamond has a question. And while everybody else is thinking of their questions, I'm going to turn the audio on for you, Benjamin, for you to ask any questions that you might have. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And we can hear you.
Okay. One question I had was for the average temperature for minimum, maximum, and the mean temperature. I was just wondering how the average temperature was arrived at. What was the calculation process?
Okay,
yeah,
yep, so...
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, for average temperature there, they take the daily maximum, add to the minimum, divide by 2. So a simple average.
Okay, but then for the entire month, how is that monthly average computed?
Doug, you maybe will help on this one. I think they might take the average temperature for each day and then divide by the number of days. Doug or Barb, you might know better how NCDC calculates that. Averages, maybe?
It's an average of the 31 days.
Mm-hmm.
The average temp, yeah. Or 30 days, whatever the number of days in the month is.
Yep. Does that make sense, Ben?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the other question I had was, how is that averaged across the entire state?
Okay, so I
Yeah.
believe they take all the stations in the state and just do a simple average of all the stations in the state. I don't know if they weight that for those maps. Doug, you might know.
There are particular stations that have been around for X number of years that they generally use to make those. It's not just any station anywhere. They're stations that meet certain criteria, if you will. And yeah, they're averaged across the state. I'm sure there is. I'm a little fuzzy on exactly how they're spread out and all that kind of stuff. But it uses the same stations. It doesn't change stations from year to year too much. It's usually the same historical climate network that they use.
And there is a spatial weighting that is applied to it, so that if you have more stations in one area and fewer in another one, that you don't get more counting
right
from the way there are more stations.
Right.
Okay. Is it the same process for precipitation?
Well, there's no max or minimum, but it's the annual daily 24-hour total that is usually used for that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Getting into the data stuff, we could have probably a whole year of data seminars talking about these issues. Not to say you shouldn't ask the questions. I'm just saying there's a lot to it and how it gets analyzed and quality controlled and all that stuff. One other, Bryce, I'm going to get to you in just a second. One other thing I did want to say is Laura brought up the issue of this particular La Nina being a player for this winter. It's definitely going to be a player, but the jury is definitely way out in terms of how important it's going to be. I think you all remember last year. Last year is a pretty good example when we had of El Nino sort of impacts, if you will, throughout our winter. Did it impact the entire winter across the Midwest and Great Plains? No. There were other influences from other what we call indices or teleconnections, other things other than El Nino influenced our winter as well. But that was a fairly dominant El Nino last year, so we would get cold, but it wouldn't last, and so it would sort of reassert itself from time to time. It's a good way to think about that. This particular, as of right now, this particular pattern doesn't look as strong and doesn't look like it's going to exert its will, if you will, as strongly over North America as the El Nino did last year. I think it's pretty safe to say that last year was a relatively warm winter, and this particular winter does not look as warm. So take that for what it's worth. Okay, Bryce, you're on. I've unmuted you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Doug. Laura, nice job this afternoon. And the question I had was having to do with that above normal precip over Montana and in the northern plains, and then into Minnesota and so forth, like you showed. Do you have any thoughts on the set of conditions that led to that type of wetter pattern over those areas that might have been in place over the past several months?
Yeah, that's a good question, Bryce. Thanks for the question. I might hand that over to Barb or Dennis, who maybe have looked at that a little closer than I have to start with.
Yeah, Barb and Dennis. Bryce, your question is: it's been a relatively wet summer, and what is what's the cause of that, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty much.
Well,
yeah.
Certainly, we've been setting up interesting patterns this fall, where we've had more moisture being transported northward. That connects with, Barb alluded to some upper 60s dew points in central Iowa and other parts of the Midwest into the middle of October, which are really unheard of. And clearly, since you're near the end of the growing season, that's not a local phenomena from evapotranspiration from crops. So we're getting more moisture transport. And if you're transporting more moisture up here, you have more moisture available to produce rainfall. So obviously we've been getting some patterns set up that we've had better moisture transport further north throughout our region. What's causing that?
Yeah, I'll add a list to that. What's causing that? Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Take the easy part. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have an answer as to exactly why we've set that up.
We've had a fairly strong Bermuda high, which helps inject moisture around it from the Gulf into this part of the world. I'll also say that we had a number of tropical systems in the Pacific which added moisture at various times that kind of fell apart, obviously, as they crossed the Rockies, but that moisture does add to our moisture here during the summer months as well. So I'll have you, if you remember, June was a relatively dry month for the most part. And there was some worry that, we're going to be in a drought and it's going to stay that way. Well, that pretty much ended near the end of June through July. And it'd be interesting just to look at July and August in terms of how wet it was, and maybe July, August, and September to look at how wet it was, because we did have substantially greater than normal precipitation during that time.
Yeah,
the cause of that from a teleconnection point of view is very difficult to say. But
yeah, I might add that I don't think the flooding in Montana is the same source as the moisture we've seen over the Midwest region, right? And if we look further west, the western states have been pretty wet lately. So it could be other things happening coming off the Pacific as well.
Well, and it's not just west either. You go north, and in Saskatchewan, they're basically almost a month behind on harvest because it's been so wet. And Alberta was the same way. So I was wondering if what we saw in Montana and North Dakota was part of something that was larger scale, looking northward. And I know that's out of the region, but that's been a lot of kind of that north central part of North America that's been very wet.
So I've got a number of other questions. First of all, can you back up one slide, please? So there was a question about where are the links to the old presentations or even this presentation. And Ada, you could look at look at the very top of that. There's two links there. Next, Mary did mention that probably the best and most the best answer you're going to get in terms of how averages and all those things are calculated is on the NCEI, National Center for Environmental Information webpage. Has complete details if you really want to get into how averages are calculated. Just going down the list here, or write me an email and I'll find it for you. The question from Kevin Gribenow was, the flooding on the Milk River, Montana was described as being unusual. Please explain and give more details about the rain event. And I'll simply say, from what I understand, it was 6 to 9 inches of rain. I don't know over what time period, but I'm sure others on the call, and I think even Kevin Lau could speak to that if we twist his arm and if he's still on. I guess he's not. Wait a minute. Yep, I found him. Kevin, I'm actually gonna unmute you because, and I actually know there's actually some people from Montana Weather Service on here as well. But Kevin, since you're from the Missouri Basin River Forecast Center, would you want to say a couple words about that flooding up there on the Milk and how unusual it was?
Well, okay. I don't know how usual it was. I mean, it was unusual, but I can't put a number to it. But the normal, looking at the rainfall, the 30-year rainfall, the normal is about half an inch, and we had 5+ inches widespread. So, that kind of gives an idea of how unusual the rainfall was. As far as flooding, I mean, we have had flooding in October before in that area, but I couldn't give you a frequency of that. I know that one of the tributaries, it actually reached the third highest. Beaver Creek, which is a tributary to the Milk River, it attained its third highest crest over its period of record. So,
third highest
is
crest.
there anyone from the Glasgow office on?
Not that I can tell.
Okay.
If they are, if I got people from Billings on, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
anyway.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't give like a statistical return interval for that kind of flooding, but it's not something that we're used to here at the River Forecast Center.
Yeah.
But Kevin, you mentioned third highest crest. That's third highest crest at any time of year, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, that would show you how odd this is, that as typical, it would be a springtime event. This is a fall event.
And Kevin Gribenow, I just unmuted you. Does that answer your question? If you're still there, Kevin? Or mispronounced your last name.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, yeah. Did I get to what you wanted to hear?
Yes, my question, but it also sounds like it's just kind of going along with this theme of we have much higher dew points and we just have much more moisture than we typically see in the fall too. Am I inferring that correctly?
Well, I think it goes along with the theme that this year, not every year, but this year in particular, was especially high in terms of dew point minimum temperatures, which also leads us to understand that the dew point temperatures were relatively high too, compared to normal, if you will. So I would like to go back and actually look at. I'm sure there had to be enhanced moisture into that region. I don't know where the moisture came from. Usually in Montana, and this is based on old-time climatology, is that moisture has to come from the east side of the mountains as opposed to the west, but I don't know exactly where it came from.
All right, thank you.
Yep. I got a few more questions here. I'm going to mute a few of you folks that were talking there. And next question is from Todd Bogenschutz. He says, so potential for La Nina event this winter, which means warmer and drier than normal winter for the Corn Belt. That's his question. That's a question. And let's see, who wants to handle that one? I mean, I can talk to that if need be. And Todd, I'm going to unmute you too in case there's a follow-up question you might have. And
so here I'm showing the outlook for December, January, February. So look at the Corn Belt region, more likely cooler than average in the northern states. Maybe smidge on the warm side in the far southern part of the Corn Belt. But then the moisture story there of the Great Lakes inclined to be wetter than average over the Great Lakes region in eastern Corn Belt. So that tells the story.
Yeah, and I think just to add a little bit to that, in Todd, I don't know if this is going to be you're going to take this very well, but we tend to be between the below and above and wet and dry in almost every case during La Nina in the Corn Belt. It's just there has to be an area between the two, and that's where it happens to be often. And doesn't mean it's going to play out that way. It won't play out that way, but this is the best forecast we have for that at the moment.
Your chances of warm and dry would increase going to the summertime if La Nina were to strengthen and last into next summer. That seems unlikely at this point.
Todd, does that help? Okay, I'm going to move on. Marion Moss, given a wetter forecast for this coming winter across Montana and Dakotas, what are the soil moisture conditions that would help absorb some of that moisture so as to reduce spring flood risk along the Missouri River? Laura, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Maybe go back to the soil moisture chart you had.
Yeah, I can start with that. So a couple different pieces looking at the upper basin, more in the mountain region, is one part of the story, but then also looking at the plains region, which right now in the Dakota, especially in South Dakota, we're a little bit on the dry side as far as soil moisture goes. So we have some potential to absorb some of that moisture this winter. I don't know that soils are saturated anywhere just yet, with the exception of that part in central Montana, but I think there's a lot of potential for soils to still absorb quite a bit of moisture that we'll see between now and the spring. So, it's going to be a little while before the River Forecast Center or the Army Corps of Engineers put out an official runoff forecast or flooded potential forecast yet. But right now, at least over the plains part of the river basin, the lower part of the upper basin, if that makes any sense, I don't see a strong potential for spring flooding at this point, but it's pretty early yet, right?
Yeah,
Doug,
let's not go too far out
on
that limb. Yeah. what I would say about that is, we're just beginning the season. There's no huge dry area. There's a bit of a wetness showing up, I would say, in Montana, but there's also the factor of freezing soil coming up, which pretty much, for the most part, doesn't allow a heck of a lot of infiltration into it unless the soil is really, really dry and there's nothing to freeze. But it doesn't look like that's the case. So I don't know when soil freeze-up actually occurs. I'm sure it occurs from north to south, but after that date, it sort of doesn't matter until it thaws out again how much the soil can absorb.
Yeah, and as far as I know, last I heard, the reservoir managers are operating, according to the manual, and have been releasing water,
right,
as needed to prepare for any winter runoff.
And let me just make sure. Hold on just a second here. Well, it doesn't look like Marion. Oh, there's Marion Moss. Marion, if you had any comments or additional questions, go ahead and ask them. I've unmuted you. Anything else you wanted to say? Okay. Got a couple comments. There are some comments on where people can get further information in terms of average temperatures and all that kind of business and how those are computed. In the question section, I'm hoping everybody can see that. And then there was a comment made by Diane about there are some issues with midges and, you're going to make me say this, epizootic hemorrhagic disease in deer in South Dakota at present. And her comment was that's normally seen during drier conditions. And to some degree, you do see some drier conditions, at least in the soil moisture, from a soil moisture and from a little bit from the drought monitor point of view up there. Any other comments on that from anybody in the crowd?
I haven't heard a lot of exceptional reports as far as the blue tongue. That's the epizootic hemorrhagic disease in deer. I haven't heard anything really much above average, but that doesn't mean it's not out there, especially in some of the far western areas that had a lot of more significant drought earlier in the season.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Raise your hand or type one in there. We have a couple more minutes in case you had anything you wanted to say, or anything from the panel. Anybody from the panel want to comment on anything? All right.
Doug, yeah, I just did a little bit more looking, and some other maps. There's some other mapping programs looking at the month of September, and it has been showing quite quite a bit higher than average moisture available, not only in our area, but across most of the eastern two-thirds of the country. So that all kind of plays into that idea of what we were talking about, just much more moisture available, influencing temperatures and adding to the precipitation possibilities.
Yeah, and again, the cause of that could be a number of things. Part of that moisture has to come from somewhere. At this point in the year, it generally does not come from the soil so much, but or evapotranspiration. It is usually pulled in from an oceanic source, and almost always it's the Gulf of Mexico one way or the other, at least in this part of the country. Not always, but almost always. So if we do have good flow up from the Gulf, if you remember back to late December last year, there was an incredible rainfall event that stretched from Louisiana to Wisconsin with major flooding, record flooding in December. So that's a great case of Gulf moisture being brought into the middle of the country. All right. Thank you all for attending and for presenting and helping on the panel and all that stuff. We will see you again in November. I think it's the 17th, Thursday. And Jim Angel will be our presenter. So compile your questions and get ready for Jim. Thank you all very, very much.